Well, today we are going to be in Acts chapter 24. Acts chapter 24, it's on page 933 if you want to use a Bible on the pew rack. And if you don't have a Bible, please take that one home with you. Or if you need a different kind, a Spanish Bible, a kid's Bible, youth Bible, we have those, and we'd love to give you one before you leave today. See me or Jared, and we'll make sure you get one when you walk out the door. Well, where we are in Acts 24, the Apostle Paul has been through quite a bit of turmoil. There was a riot in Jerusalem as a result of his presence. People didn't like him. So they started a riot, beat him, almost killed him, and then he got taken by the Romans. The Romans almost beat him. Then they had a little hearing, and the hearing turned into a riot, and he was almost killed again. Rescued again by the Romans. And they discovered a plot by the Jewish leaders to kill Paul. So they shipped Paul off to the Roman governor. And the Roman governor was a guy named Felix. Felix took Paul and held him in this kind of palace in Caesarea. Now this palace is famous. This palace where the Roman governor of the region has set up shop was built by Herod the Great. And Herod the Great, purposefully we believe, his great-granddaughter was Felix the governor's wife. We believe Felix the governor married this girl because of her relation to Herod the Great, because Felix wanted to give off the sense of importance. Felix was not a young man, and his wife Drusilla, the great-granddaughter of Herod the Great, at this point in time in history, we're going to see her today in Acts 24, she's about 19 years old. She was married to somebody before Felix, but that's a whole different story, and it's sordid and crazy. But Felix is there, and I'm going to show you a picture of ancient Caesarea. Tony, why don't you go and put that picture up? This back there, that's the ancient city, the ruins of Caesarea. You kind of see an amphitheater back over there. And this little section down here at the bottom, that is Herod's palace that he built, Herod the Great. Tony, click on the other picture, the close-up. And so this is a close-up of it. You see that giant rectangle right there in the middle of it? That was a pool Herod built his palace around. Just to give you perspective on the size of that pool. It's about 5 feet longer than this room, from those doors to the stained glass. It's about 5 feet longer than that, and it's just as wide as this room. That's how big that pool is in the middle of Herod's house. And it's got these little channels coming in and out of both sides. The idea behind that is engineers who built this, it brought in fresh water from the area around and flushed it out the other side. So it was constantly having fresh water in it. And so his entire house was built around this massive pool in his house. And it had these big palatial rooms and all over the place. And that is where Felix has set up his residency there in Caesarea. And he's brought Paul in and kept him under guard in one of those rooms. But the thing about Felix, you can go and click off of that, Tony. Felix is a very unique character because he was a former slave. He and his brother were actually slaves of the current emperor's mom. They were her slaves, but then they were set free. And Felix's brother took up a very important position in Rome. Felix worked his way up to become governor of this region. And it was really his connection to the emperor that kept him his position. Because Felix was known as being extremely harsh. And he was also all over the place with his judgments. People would bring him court cases. And whatever the offense was, one day his ruling would be very easy, a slap on the wrist. The next day, the exact same situation, and he would put the guy to death. It's just whatever was going on in the moment. But it's also fascinating. When I say fascinating, it's also kind of sad. His wife, great-granddaughter of Herod the Great, was a Jew. But Felix is historically known for being incredibly harsh to the Jews, killing them in droves. It's actually, he eventually gets removed from his position because he killed a bunch of Jews in trying to put down a rebellion. He went too far. And at that point, his connection to the emperor was over with because his emperor connection had died. The emperor was dead, and there was a new emperor, and that emperor removed Felix, recalled him to Rome, and Felix kind of died in obscurity there in Rome. But during this period, he is the guy in charge, living in Herod the Great's palace. He is famous for being incredibly harsh to Jews, and he's the guy who's in charge of Paul. This man who's unpredictable, this man who is very harsh, and that's the one who's going to decide Paul's fate in the moment. So look at Acts 24, verse 1. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down, and some elders, and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul. Now, the spokesman, that is an ancient way of saying a lawyer. He was the one who knew the laws, and he was the only one who was, supposed to speak for them in the court unless the governor asked questions specifically of other guys. And so he is the high priest lawyer. That's the one they bring down there. And this high priest, we talked about it last time we saw this guy, is famously corrupt, and he would work with the Romans any chance he got. And so he comes down there with his entourage, with his lawyer, and they make their case first. Verse 2. And when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation in every way and everywhere, we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly." So obviously, Tertullus is kind of buttering up Felix a little bit. "Felix, you're the greatest governor we've ever had in the history of the world. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let me just tell you what's going on here with this terrible, terrible person, Paul." Look at verse 5. "For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him." So he's given he brings 3 accusations against Paul. He stirs up riots. He's a ringleader of a sect of the Nazarenes. He's kind of calling Christianity an offshoot of Judaism, like a heresy of Judaism, almost a cult, the way he's framing it here. And he said that Paul even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. So when the lawyer gets done saying his little spiel, Ananias, the chief priest, his little entourage starts basically amening everything the lawyer said. And say, "That's right, he's terrible, he's awful, you need to listen to what Tertullus is saying." Verse 10. "And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, 'Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense.'" Now, if you were Paul in this scenario, right, still recovering from being beaten in the temple, still recovering from almost being beaten by the Romans, sitting being under guard in this palace by a man who notoriously treats Jews very, very poorly, would you respond in this way? "I cheerfully make my defense to you. I can't wait to present my case before you." And what we're going to see, Paul's going to do what he's always done. He is going to be angling in everything he says towards the gospel. He's not going to say, "This is why you need to let me out of prison." He's not going to say that. He's not going to go that way with his argument. His entire argument is to angle towards sharing the gospel with this Roman, with Felix. Verse 10. "You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city." It says, I didn't do any of that. It's only 12 days ago I was there. And if you look back in verse 1, Paul's been under guard in Caesarea for 5 days. So he was only in Jerusalem for 7 days. Paul's basically saying, I wasn't there long enough to stir up a riot. I wasn't there long enough for that. And that would have really been the only charge against him that the Romans cared about. Profaning the temple, that was something for the people in Jerusalem. Being a leader of a religious group, that wouldn't have been a purview of a Roman governor. But if he's really a guy stirring up riots, that would have been a problem. So Paul says, I wasn't there long enough to stir up riots. Now again, Paul's not trying to defend himself to get out from under the prison here. Paul is trying to show that Felix should listen to him. Because if Paul really is somebody who's a guy who stirred up riots, the Roman governor's not going to listen to him. But Paul wants to present the gospel. And so he's telling him, I was not doing that. Verse 13. Neither can they prove to you what they bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, and that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. And so notice he's making a beeline towards the gospel. He starts off saying, I believe everything they believe about the Old Testament. I believe everything that they believe about the prophecies and about what's to come, about the resurrection of the dead. Now, that is his angling towards Jesus. And those guys there, they do believe in resurrection of the dead. They do believe in the afterlife. They believe a little bit different than Paul does. Because Paul believes that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. Verse 16. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Now, after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. Now, this is very important because Paul writes about this very thing in many of his letters. There was a prophecy earlier in the book of Acts that some of the Jews in Jerusalem were going to undergo great poverty, that there was going to be this famine that was going to come, and the Jewish church, Jewish Christian church in Jerusalem was going to suffer, and the ministry was going to shrivel up. And so the Gentile Christians started taking up an offering to go and help the ministry work there in Jerusalem. And they give the money to Paul to bring. And so he goes to Jerusalem. When he shows up in Jerusalem and they end up having that riot, he's bringing that offering to the Jewish Christians. And he says, I was out there ministering, doing all this, preaching about the resurrection of the dead, of Jesus. And I did that for several years, and I was bringing the offerings to Jerusalem. Verse, 18. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple, without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you and to make an accusation, should they have anything against me. Now, it was the Jews from Asia who showed up in the temple that caused all the problems for Paul. It wasn't the high priest. It wasn't his Jewish entourage. They weren't there that day. But these other guys had the problem. So Paul says, these guys here in the room, they can't make an accusation because they didn't witness any of it. He says, they ought to be here. Verse 20. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. He says they should only be able to testify about what they saw when I was before them. And at that point, when he was before the council, he shared the gospel with them, speaking of the resurrection of the dead. He said, other than this one thing, that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. So Paul again steers it back towards the resurrection of Jesus. And Felix, Governor Felix, because he's married to a Jew and he knows his area fairly well, has an idea of what is really going on here. So look at what he does, verse 22. He delays. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, that's what they call Christianity, put them off, saying, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. So basically, the Roman governor this is a delay tactic because Lysias the tribune was never asked to come and present his case. And so he says, when the tribune comes, we'll finish this, even though he has no intention of asking the tribune to come. He's just going to put Paul back in a room. He's going to shelve this whole case, send away the high priest, dismiss the high priest and his whole entourage, and just let it be. And then he says, put him under custody, let him have some freedom. Maybe he got to use the pool there in Herod's palace. But he said, let his friends come and attend to his needs. When you were in a Roman prison, they didn't give you food. You know, it's not like an American prison where they bring you food and drink every day, you know, get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you were to eat, your friends outside of prison had to bring you food. That's the only way you got to eat. Otherwise, you just starved to death there in the Roman prison. And so he says, let people come in and they can bring him food. They can attend to his needs. Maybe, you know, he's still bruised and broken from the beating he received before. He says, let them come and take care of him. Let that be done. Because Paul had said something that piqued the interest of old Felix. Look at verse 24. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. And he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. So again, every opportunity Paul gets in front of Felix, he's sharing the gospel. About the judgment coming, Felix needs to repent and turn. About having self-control and changing his ways, that Felix needs righteousness before God. And Paul continually presents this, and this makes Felix nervous. I mean, Paul speaking about judgment, Felix doesn't want to be judged. You know, I mean, he doesn't want to face judgment, and so he says, send him away. I don't like this conversation. And he'd send Paul away, and then he would bring him back again to have another conversation later. Look at verse 26. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul, so he sent for him often and conversed with him. Remember, Paul told him, when I came to Jerusalem, I showed up with a whole bunch of money. I showed up with a whole bunch of money. He didn't specify to Felix what he was there to do with that money. He just says, I came with a bunch of money. And Felix is thinking, well, he's going to try to grease the wheels here, and he's going to pay me under the table to get out of here, get a good judgment for him. I mean, corruption, it was rampant, but it was illegal. But he's hoping that Paul slips him some cash. So he keeps asking Paul to come in, and Paul completely ignores the whole thing and just gives him the gospel. Whether Paul knows the custom or not, he sees this as an opportunity. It kind of, reminds me, you might have seen Home Alone 2. When the bellhop comes to the door and he's asking for money from Kevin, and Kevin gives him a piece of gum, kind of a situation. He wants money from Paul, and Paul gives him the gospel, something far better than the money, far better than a piece of gum. Continually, every opportunity Paul gets, he's presenting him with the gospel. Now look at this, the sad part. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So Felix was recalled to Rome. He was removed from his position because of his harshness. Leaves Paul in prison. So for 2 years, Paul languishes in prison. For 2 years, Felix keeps bringing Paul out to ask him questions, and Paul keeps presenting the gospel. And 2 years, he just leaves him there. Leaves him there. Paul, he's unjustly imprisoned. He's unjustly imprisoned by a very unpredictable man. If you were Paul in this scenario, what would your spirit be right there in that moment? Would you be having a hard time? Would you be doubting what's going to come the next day? Would you be concerned that it might be your last day because he's not letting you out? He's not giving you a proper hearing. He's not giving you any opportunity. He's just keeping you under guard and not giving you the freedom you had when you were going out sharing the gospel all over the country. He just leaves him there. Paul unjustly imprisoned. I know I would be thinking, if only he would allow this, if only he would follow the law, if only he were right, if only he would do what was right. But the truth of the matter is, in all of our lives, we come across situations similar to this, maybe not this exact situation, but where we want somebody to do something they're not doing. We want to control people. If only they would do what we were thinking they would do, life would be amazing. If only everybody did what I said they would do, then everything would be hunky-dory and perfect. And nobody would fight, and everything would be great, and everything would be just amazing. But the thing is, you can't control what you can't control, and you definitely can't control other people. If you haven't discovered that yet, it's a truth you need to, remember constantly. You cannot control other people. They're going to do what they're going to do. And Paul actually wrote about this in Romans. In Romans chapter 12, verse 18, he said, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live at peace with all. Live peaceably with all. As far as it depends on you. Paul knew he could not control other people. He knew it was impossible to control other people. But he said, as far as it depends on you, with what you are able to control, your actions, your attitudes, live at peace with other people. You can't control how they act. They're going to be offensive, and they're going to say things in a tone, and they're going to do things unjustly. But that's not you. You need to follow Jesus. Ephesians 5:1, imitate Jesus. You need to follow Jesus in all capacities. Live at peace with everybody. So that means your spirit should not be upset with other people. Let me say that again. You should not be, as a Christian, upset with other people. You should be at peace with them. Because again, Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6, your fight is not against flesh and blood. It's not against them. They're not the enemy. The enemy's the one who gets a hold of their mind. The enemy's the one who gets a hold of their heart. The enemy's the one who gets a hold of their words. The enemy will mess them up to mess you up. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with them. They're going to do what they're going to do. But you need to do what Jesus wants you to do, live at peace. So how was Paul able to go in there to Felix every single day when Felix was being unjust, when Felix was just wanting some money, when Felix was not being right? Paul went in there because he was at peace with Felix. Paul went in there because he was at peace with the situation. Not that the situation was right, but he was at peace with it. You say, how can Paul be at peace with this? Things are nuts. This is chaos. Because it wasn't Paul's peace. Jesus said in John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Jesus' peace. Jesus said, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let them be afraid. And so when we're not at peace, there is trouble in our hearts. When we're not at peace, there is fear in our hearts. He says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Peace is a gift from Jesus. Paul was able to be at peace with Felix because it was Jesus' peace, not his own. It wasn't fabricated. It wasn't built up. Paul knew he could not control Felix, but he could be at peace with him. You see, control is a deception. Control of a situation or a person, control is a deception of the enemy. The enemy will lie to you that you can control whatever's popping up in your life. He lies to you and says control will quiet the chaos, that control will bring peace. But the reality is, control crushes you under the weight of what you were never meant to pick up. Control crushes you under the weight of what you were never meant to pick up. You see, human, you're not meant to control things. God is. And if you try to pick something up that only God can pick up, I don't know how old you are, you're going to throw your back out. You're going to bust your kneecap. You're going to mess up your entire spiritual life because you're trying to pick up something that's not yours to pick up. He's the controller. You don't need to mess with that. You shouldn't try to pick it up because you can't. It's not on you to pick it up. It's on him to pick it up. A few weeks ago, the water heater went out here at the church. We called the plumber. The plumber came and checked it out. It was leaking through down into Connie's office. It was leaking through the roof. the ceiling. It was a mess. And he came out here and he said, "Oh yeah, it's broken." I said, "Okay, what do we need to do?" He said, "Well, let's look at it." He looked at it, and he called a guy to bring out a new water heater. Well, the water heater, empty. It's one water heater for the whole church. Water heater empty weighs 600 pounds. And it's got to go upstairs in the attic. And the plumber, when he called me and said that, he goes, "I don't know what we're going to do." I said, "Okay, Ben, let's just do it anyway." And so he shows up one day. This truck pulls in, a huge truck, bringing the 600-pound water heater. And they've got a dolly, and they've got this lift, and they bring it in the church, and they set it down the hall. And Ben says, "Okay, let me think about it a few days, and I'll call you again." And so it was the week after the ice. Ben shows up that Friday with 10 guys. 10 guys and straps and dollies and lifts, and they get it up that stairway. They get the other one down. They get the new one up that stairway. 600 pounds, 10 guys with a stairway that's as big as 2 guys side to side. And they get it. It takes them 4 hours to get the other one down and the new one up. But if one guy tried to lift that water heater, there'd be no more guy. Because it took more than what one guy could do. If you try to lift what you were never meant to lift, it will crush you. And you will use everything you have to try to lift that thing, and you won't understand why it's not moving. You won't understand why you can't control it. That's because you won't accept it's not yours to control. Far too often, we try to control what's not ours to control. That's why there's so many medical websites, so that we can look it up and we can be the doctor and we can be the expert. Because don't you know, those doctors love when you come in their office and say, "Well, I read this on the internet." And we should all know, I mean, as Abraham Lincoln said, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. You know, you just never know what's out there. But you can't control what you can't control. Really, assuming control steals the Lord's role in your life. When you assume control, you're usurping the Lord's position in your heart and in your life. When you should be pursuing peace, like Paul there before Felix. And peace isn't just calm. Peace isn't just a calm of the chaos. Peace is calm in the chaos. Peace, the literal Greek word for peace, it is a state of being. It is being untroubled or undisturbed. Being untroubled or undisturbed. No matter what's going on around you, being untroubled and undisturbed. No matter what somebody else does, it's being untroubled and undisturbed. Peace does not come from a lack of trouble. Peace does not come from a lack of chaos or a lack of problems. That is not peace. Peace doesn't come from our circumstances. That is not peace. Peace has actually nothing to do with our circumstances. You see, the lack of a storm is not peace. That's just ease. That's just an easy life. Lack of a storm is just ease. Peace is confidence of unshakable faith, no matter how big the storm is. In Mark chapter 4, if you remember, Jesus asleep in the boat and the disciples around him, and the storm came and the disciples panicked and they woke Jesus up from his nap and he calmed the storm. And you know what Jesus said to his disciples after he calmed the storm? It's Mark 4:40. He said, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" What Jesus did is he linked peace to faith. You can have peace in the storm if you have faith. But the moment we sidestep our faith and we usurp God's role in our lives and we try to control the situation, then everything's going to go awry and we're going to miss the whole thing. And the fear creeps in, and the frustration creeps in, and the offense creeps in, and all this other stuff creeps in because we're not focused where we need to be focused. We're missing the whole thing. We're allowing the leak to continue to come. The other day, in a bathroom in our house, the handle of the faucet broke off. It was at night, and I heard one of the boys, I was in the living room, I heard him say, "Go get Dad!" And when it's nighttime and you hear somebody say that, you don't know what's going on. So I go running back there, and there's one of the boys the handle had snapped completely off. He's trying to hold the handle down, but there's water all up the mirror and on the ceiling and dripping all over the walls, and he's trying to hold it down. And so I went under the sink and turned all the water off, and it stopped. But if I didn't turn the water off, it would continue to shoot everywhere, uncontrollably. My son could stand there all day long and try to put that broken faucet handle back on the water shooting out, and it's going to keep shooting out. Because you can't control the water shooting out that way. You have to go to the source. Jesus is our source. We can't control what's going on, and so we need him to take care of it. We need him to fix it. Other people can't fix it. Only he can. Storm is everywhere. But we need to have faith that he can bring us peace. And so we need to come to Jesus. He tells us that in Matthew chapter 11. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." He says, "Come to me, and you will have peace. Come to me, and you will have relief." But we got to go to Jesus. We can't get it from somewhere else. We got to go to Jesus. And he will give us that relief, because relief is in the release. You have to release control. You have to let go of the control. You have to even let go of the desire for control. Because if the desire is still there, then we're still going to usurp the Lord's role in our lives. We have to release it. And only by releasing it will we find relief, will we find peace. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what am I trying to control? Who am I trying to control? What do I need to release? What expectations do I need to release? Expectations of situations, expectations of what I thought life was going to be like, expectations I've placed on people and may not even realize I put them there, but what expectations do I need to release and give it to Jesus and find peace? Peace can be experienced. Peace can be experienced in this life that is chaotic and problematic. But peace can only be experienced from Jesus. This is a promise in Isaiah 26, 3 and 4. "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock." You keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. So it's not just that peace can be known, it's that perfect peace can be known when our mind is stayed on the Lord. When we allow our mind to venture into other areas, the peace departs. Because we have departed from Jesus. You ever wonder why you're more anxious when you've been scrolling on social media for an hour? Because it's not Jesus. You ever wonder why your mind is in 15 different places full of sinfulness when you've been binge watching that one show? Because it's not Jesus. You keep him in perfect peace when his mind is stayed on you. When our minds are on Jesus, perfect peace is allowed. But notice, again, perfect peace comes from that. Perfect peace cannot be taken. Perfect peace is received when Jesus is our aim instead of control. Perfect peace is received when Jesus is our aim and control is not our aim. Perfect peace is then received. It is received. It's not attained. It's not achieved. And that's another lie that the enemy will give to you, that you can somehow bend circumstances to your will and you can attain a peace-filled life. You can achieve a peace-filled life. But achievable peace is ever elusive because achievable peace can never be found. You can't achieve peace. You can't attain peace. You can't one day arrive and peace is there. Real peace is never reached. Real peace is only received. Real peace is only received. I mean, that's what Jesus said in that John 14 passage we looked at a minute ago. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. He says, I give you peace. It's a gift from him. Now, the thing about a gift is you don't have to open it. It can sit there all day long and you not open it. Anybody ever send you a gift before your birthday or Christmas and you don't open it till your birthday? It's just sitting there. It's there for you to have, but you don't open it yet because you haven't opened it yet and you got rules or whatever. Or maybe you open it early and just don't tell them about it until later. Oh, thank you so much for the thing, and whatever. But real peace can only be received. It can only be taken from Jesus. He gives it freely to anybody who knows him. But he's the only one who can give it. We can't get it from trying to quiet the noise. We can't get it from trying to make everything do what we want it to do. We can't get it from trying to pursue perfect health in us and our family. We can't get peace from trying to have financial peace. We can't get peace from trying to make everybody speak kindly and say what we want them to say and do what we want them to do, from the internet company to stop sending us, new bills with crazy fees. We can't get peace from any of that stuff. Peace can only be received from Jesus. And so when we pursue peace from all these other things and we wonder why it doesn't stay, we may feel peaceful for a moment, but then something else pops up and we're going crazy. Our anxiety level jumps up to an 8 or a 9 again. And we don't know how to get out of it because we're looking for peace in all the wrong places. Peace can only be received from Jesus. We can only get it from Jesus. We have to release control and turn to Jesus. I mean, we look at guys like Paul and say, how in the world is Paul able to have peace when he's sitting in that Roman palace, but he's imprisoned by Felix, this unjust man who is crazy. And it's only going to get crazier for Paul from here. But how's he able to have peace in that? Because he's looking to Jesus, not his circumstances. He's looking to Jesus, not how things were in that moment. He's looking to Jesus for peace. So how can we have peace? We have to let go of the control. Is there anything you're trying to control in your life? Is there anybody you're trying to control? Do you want to know that perfect peace from Jesus? Then your mind has to stay on him. Again, that's a promise. Isaiah 26:3. It's a promise from God. Keep your mind on Jesus. Perfect peace is accessible to you. Keep your mind on Jesus, and you can receive what he's giving. So do you want to know perfect peace? You got to give up control. You got to give up trying to bend things and people to how you want them to be. And you got to go to Jesus and allow him to handle the situation. Do you want peace? Do you want to finally know peace? Will you receive that peace from Jesus today? Will you receive it? Or will you just be a present you throw in the corner and you forget about? Come out once a year, dust it off, think about it, but then put it back in the corner and forget about it. Will you receive that peace from Jesus? Maybe you need to receive Jesus for the first time. Believe that Jesus is God's Son, that he died so all your sins would be forgiven. He rose from the dead so you can live after you die. You need to believe in Jesus. That's the only way to salvation. Jesus said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There's no way to God, no way to heaven except by believing in Jesus. You can't do enough good stuff to get to heaven. That's not the way God works. He actually says that. Paul wrote that. That the only way is by grace, through faith, not by your works, so that nobody can boast. That's in Ephesians. The only way to heaven is by believing in Jesus. Will you believe in Jesus today? Believe in Jesus, his death and salvation, or his death and resurrection for your salvation. Believe in him today.